Hi, I'm Angela Lococo. This is my speech 2-inch informative speech. This is my friend Christina, and these are my note cards. Okay. Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh man, you got something. There you go, yeah. Okay. Government scandals, smuggling cocaine, and one man that covered it all. Gary Webb is an investigative journalist that's most known for the controversial article, The Dark Alliance, in which Webb explains that for the better part of a decade, a San Francisco Bay Area drug ring sold tons of cocaine to the Crips and Blood street gangs of Los Angeles and funneled millions in drug profits to a Latin American guerrilla army run by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, or also known as the CIA. My purpose in sharing this story is to inform you on the contents of this book as well as the series Webb has written for the San Jose Mercury News, the backlash received, and how it affected the Black community. And this in turn will hopefully inspire critical thinking when faced with an argument. In order to give unbiased and an informed opinion, I have used multiple sources, from Gary Webb's articles and the series The Dark Alliance, as well as the news outlets that have discredited his work, like the LA Times and Washington Post. I have also used Britannica and Wikipedia for general information and official government documents. I'm so sorry. Within the speech, the information Webb had dug up in how the U.S. African American community and news outlets reacted will be seen from an outsider perspective. What Webb books entails... Oh, I'm so sorry. Gary Webb's impact on investigative journalism in the African American community shows how insightful and how twisted the truth can become. His book, Dark Alliance, goes into detail of his investigative journey and slowly reveals possible scandalous acts by the CIA, while shining a sympathetic light on the African American community. This story begins with three men: Ricky Ross, Danil Blandon, and Norman Meneses. Now, Ricky Ross was famous for being one of the many men that helped fuel the crack epidemic. But if Ross was the candy man, then Blandon was Willy Wonka, selling Ross 10 to 15 kilos of cocaine a week, according to Blandon. But Willy Wonka also worked for the CIA, which led Webb to piece together his theory that the CIA is supporting members from the Nicaraguan Contra, despite knowing that they're cocaine smugglers, to help fund the war in Nicaragua. When the African American community caught wind of the news, it sparked outrage, since the story was teeming with conspiracy theories that the government was trying to discriminate against the Black community due to cocaine being predominantly sold in Black neighborhoods. This led to rallies in Watts and Compton, as well as multiple discussions on Black media in the U.S. Let's see. Right. With the increase on Webb and his story, the public demanded answers from the government. But the government was able to stay quiet longer due to the news outlets wanting to gain in on the story. A majority of Webb's research was made through him physically getting the information, undocumented, albeit, but from a multitude of drug dealers, court cases, and a few government documents. But the evidence was still on shaky ground. This made Webb's story very susceptible to criticism from the press. Big newspapers like the Washington Post, New York Times, and the Los Angeles Times began to downplay the events that were revealed by Webb and began to attack the series. And while there were people that acknowledges Webb's work, like David Korn, a Washington Post editor, he said that although he deserves credit for pursuing an important piece of recent history and forcing the CIA and the Justice Department to investigate, he still believed that Webb's threshold of proof was on the low side. The Los Angeles Times even did their own version of the Dark Alliance, but went into more detail about the CIA's knowledge and Contra involvement. But without the government's response, many of those allegations from the press were taken with a grain of salt. After many people demanded answers from the government due to the backlash of the African American community, members of the Congressional Black Caucus called for an investigation. The Justice Department stated that the allegations contained in the original Mercury News articles were exaggerations of the actual finds. This was written by a government official with the last name Carey, as well as 2 other officials. The CIA Inspector General report released 2 volumes for the story, which I believe are the California story and the Contra story. None of Webb's main claims were proven from this report as well. The California story states that no evidence was found that any past or present employee of CIA or anyone acting on behalf of the CIA had any direct contact, direct or indirect dealing. But none of, let's see. Right. The House of Committee report also claims that information in Webb's Dark Alliance was false and that there was no evidence that the CIA knew about it. But this information also kind of clashes with Webb's information, the documents that he had, one including handwritten notes by National Security Council Oliver North, who knew that the drug money was being used to fund Contras. As well as the Carey report, as who I mentioned earlier, where it stated senior U.S. policymakers were not immune to the idea that drug money was a perfect solution to the Contras' funding problems. By this point, Webb's career has hit its all-time low. He spent the last years of his life engulfed in this piece due to Webb being demoted and left unable to find another job at a newspaper company. He took his life with 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Many people believe that this couldn't be a suicide, but it hasn't been proven otherwise. While his work remains controversial, its contents are brought up time and time again. Whether or not Gary Webb's claims are true, it did show that agency officials heard allegations but did little to intervene. And although with help from the Black community, this piece allowed the people to have an insight into what the government was doing, Webb's claims were swept under the rug due to media ripping apart his piece, along with the government documents that completely discredited him. Though Gary Webb's research, through Gary Webb's research, what was I? Oh my gosh, I totally forgot. Through Gary Webb's research, many people across the country began to think more critically of the government and of their surroundings in general. But it also taught them not to believe everything they read. Whether or not Gary Webb's story is true, I personally believe that it was an important article due to how many variables factor into it. It inspired me to look deeper under the surface, and I hope that this speech has inspired you to do the same. Okay, I'm sorry, I dropped my note cards. I hope that doesn't affect anything. but here they are. There you go. Sorry. Okay. Thank you.